thank you, Mark, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Well, if I had known what the previous speaker was going to present about, my topic would have been different. I chose this topic because I have not been attending these lectures. But Africa, just to go back to what was being said, Africa is the continent of now. Is the continent with the highest economic growth in the world right now, average of 5%. It's been 7%, 9% over the past few years. Very few continents have that. As was said there, Africa is vibrant. We've got so much culture, we've got so much history, and if we could put a value to that, I think it would be very rich. And there was the issue of the dichotomy. I'm not sure who spoke about that, about young Africans risking their lives to cross the Mediterranean to come to Europe, which is only growing at 2% or 1%, leaving a continent with a growth of 5%. So these are issues maybe we need to be looking at, to be reflecting upon, and what we should do to make sure that the continent is not a continent of flight. And we should also look at why young people are leaving. Some are leaving because they are fleeing conflict, and we should look at why there is so much conflict. Some are economic refugees seeking greener pastures somewhere else. Well, economic migration has been a feature of the world for many, many centuries. It's not the first. A program was on CNN recently to say, well, some of these young people, they can afford $4,000, $5,000 to pay some smugglers so that they are smuggled across the Mediterranean Sea. So these are aspects which people need to look at, and not to just tell one big story. There's so many variations and variables to why all this is happening. So I thought maybe I should just comment on that before I go to my presentation. Now, my presentation is about what informs Zimbabwe's conduct of cultural diplomacy. I'll start by saying I'm honored and humbled to have been invited by the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy to take part in the International Symposium on Cultural Diplomacy 2015, which is reflecting on the 70th anniversary of the end of the World War, the Second World War that is, and the establishment of the United Nations. And the sub-theme is developing initiatives to promote cultural understanding, global human rights, and world peace. Like I said, I, however, feel disadvantaged as I've not been able to participate at any of the sessions since the beginning of the symposium, except for this morning, of course. However, be that as it may, I hope my contribution will be received in this vein, and I also hope that it will generate interest and understanding in the country that I represent. Cultural diplomacy for us is all about fostering understanding and appreciation, one sure way of contributing to world peace. It reveals for us, for Zimbabwe, the soul of our nation, which can explain our complicated history, and which is a tool which we have used when we went through a difficult period in our relations with the outside world. There is a legend which is told in my country from generation to generation through oral history, which goes like this. Uncle Baboon was invited for a feast by his cousin Tsuro, who is the hare or the rabbit. So Uncle Baboon arrives at this homestead, and he's told that before anyone can partake in the feast, you have to go and wash your hands. And they are directed to a stream which is just nearby to go and wash their hands and then come back and join in the feast. But between the house and the stream, there's a patch of burnt grass. So Uncle Baboon troops with his relatives, they go and wash their hands, they come back. But they pass through this burnt area, so their hands are dirty. When they came, they say, we've washed our hands. Suro looks at them and says, your hands are dirty. You have to go back. So this goes on, they come back, they go, they come back, until the feast is finished. And then they complain and they say, how can you treat us like this? And Suro answers to say, this is how we do things in this homestead. Why do I tell this, or what is the moral behind this? It is every nation, every people have a way of doing things. This is what works for them. And this is what makes their society move. We find that strife, misunderstanding, and even war will result when I believe that my way of doing things is the right way and the only way. Misconceptions, misinformation, misperceptions, they are a threat to world peace. And as you are debating, or as you have been debating on the theme of developing initiatives to promote cultural understanding, global human rights, and world peace, you will have, or you already have, occasion to address ways of overcoming this. Misconceptions, misperceptions, they are created when one story is told by other people, when one is not given a chance to explain their story, when the story of Africa is told by other people and not by the Africans themselves. The story of Zimbabwe has been told by many people. When your story is stereotyped, when your story is caricatured, then your story is misrepresented. Zimbabwe's cultural diplomacy is informed by its history, its cultural heritage, its experiences of the past, among others. The past shapes our thinking, it colors how we approach issues, and how we do things. Last week, we had the visit of former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo. And he correctly pointed out that the past is gone. We cannot do anything about it. It is recorded history. But we can learn from it, and we can correct its mistakes and make sure that it doesn't happen again. The same holds true for Zimbabwe, and for many countries, if I can say. The echo was repeated recently in various countries in events commemorating the end of the Second World War, that never again should this be allowed to happen. Indeed, the founding charter of the United Nations implies that there should never again be another world war in the vein of the last one. A prominent writer, Richard Vaughan, writes about Zimbabwe, and he says that the narrative of Zimbabwe is a narrative of an indigenous people being overrun by the great economic strength of outsiders before finally acquiring self-determination through political struggle. It is also the story of a fusion of cultures, of an indigenous civilization absorbing the characteristics of the very influences which it sought to dispel. Zimbabwe's modern history, while owing a great deal to the Shona and Ndebele cultures, is also peppered with ideologies from Europe and the Arab world, ideologies of market capitalism, of Christianity, of Islam, Marxism, and parliamentary democracy, to name but a few. I mentioned the Shona and the Ndebele, maybe just to clarify for some of you. These are the two dominant ethnic groups in Zimbabwe. We are fortunate in that we don't have 40 ethnic groups and so forth. Just the two main dominant, which constitute like 95% of our population. And then we have others because of the colonial boundaries which are common with our neighbors on all sides of our boundaries. Now, the Arabs, not the Europeans, were the first foreigners to break into the ancient land which lay between the Limpopo and the Zambezi, which is modern-day Zimbabwe. The East Coast Muslims made no attempt of territorial domination during their main period of influence, and this was from the 10th to the 16th century. But there was plenty of cultural and commercial interaction. Then came the Portuguese, who were the next to arrive in the 16th century, and they unsuccessfully tried to attach and control the wealthy and powerful Mutapa dynasty. The Portuguese then resorted to less direct means of control, and through their skillful political maneuvers, they were rewarded in 1629 by a treaty which effectively made them rulers of the state. But they were working through officials, indigenous officials, who were acceptable to them. Conversion to Christianity through Dominican priests was the main criteria of acceptability. Things, however, changed for the Portuguese in 1690 with the emergence of a new dynasty, the Changamire dynasty. This succeeded in driving out the Portuguese, and from then onwards, the role of the Portuguese was reduced to a commercial one. The next wave of territorial interest was in 1890, when Europeans came in large numbers, following the discovery by one European, a Britishman called Henry Hartley, of some ancient gold workings. Then the land was besieged by groups of Boers. Well, the Boers, these were Dutch settlers who had moved to South Africa, to the Cape. And they were making expeditions into the territory. Despite, at that time, the paucity of large gold deposits, other natural resources were discovered. Among them, an abundance of rich farmland under a perfect climate. And now we see the Portuguese, the British, the Spanish, the Germans, the Dutch, and the Belgians, all looking lustfully at the land north of the Limpopo. The scramble for Africa was well and truly on its way. The most predatory of them all was an Englishman called Cecil John Rhodes, who had traveled to the continent at the age of 17 to improve his health. Within 2 years, Rhodes had made a huge fortune in diamonds, and by his early 30s, he had become a political force to be reckoned with, both in Africa and in Britain. His vision, his grand vision, was for a railway line linking the Cape, which is Cape Town in South Africa, to Cairo in the north of Africa in Egypt. In 1887, Rhodes moved to prevent an impending settlement between the Boers of Transvaal and Lobengula, who was the king in my country then. John Moffat, a missionary, obtained a treaty for Rhodes, in which Lobengula vowed not to enter into any agreement with another political power without British approval. Later that year, Rhodes again, through his business partner, Charles Rand, managed to get Lobengula to grant complete and exclusive rights to all minerals in his kingdom, in his principalities and domains, together with full power to do all things that they may deem necessary to win and procure the same. This is a quotation. So we find on 18 September 1890, the British flag was raised in Mashonaland. The country was named Rhodesia after Cecil John Rhodes, and thus began 90 years of British rule. Cecil Rhodes was operating within the accepted cultural norms of Victorian Britain. This had popularized in such a way that placed the white man just below God, at the top of the great chain of human beings, with other people taking their place at various points below him, below the white man, that is. It was a world in which it seemed perfectly natural for a young man to feel a sense of mission in civilizing people of another continent while filling the coffers of the Queen's treasury. As it happened, white supremacy was to last only a few generations. In 90 years, the political kingdom would be back in indigenous hands. On April 18, 1980, after a protracted struggle, an independent Zimbabwe was born. In our practice of cultural diplomacy, we remember this history, we remember this experience, and we teach our children, lest we forget. Upon the attainment of independence, Zimbabwe became a member of the United Nations, the Organization of African Union, which later was transformed into the African Union, Southern Africa Development Community, and other international organizations. The country signed the charters or constitutive acts of these organizations, some of whose principles include maintenance of peace and security, the peaceful settlement of international and regional disputes or situations which might lead to the breach of peace. In its conduct of interstate relations, and indeed in its conduct of cultural diplomacy, Zimbabwe is informed by these principles, which it holds dearly and cherishes. It is common cause that from the year 2000, Zimbabwe has had a toxic relationship with the West and was subject to demonization, to isolation, to ostracization. Well, during this time, Zimbabwe resorted to the use of its varied cultural and historical resources as a tool of creating understanding and building bridges. Zimbabwe is blessed with thousands of sites of interest, rock art sites, stone ruins, and historical buildings, not to mention the vibrant art sector and rich and diverse cultural traditions. In addition, Zimbabwe has used its natural tourist attractions during this period as instruments of cultural diplomacy. The most notable of these was the joint hosting with Zambia of the 2013 United Nations World Tourism Organization in Victoria Falls. 700 delegates from 120 countries and 900 delegates from affiliate organizations attended the assembly. And this was a huge endorsement of Zimbabwe, especially in the context of the decade-long pariah state which the country had enjoyed. Tourist figures since then have been on the rise, and the country has received positive coverage of its tourist attractions on BBC and CNN. And just last month, it was named as one of the 52 must-visit sites for 2015 by the New York Times. The World Tourism Assembly came soon after the country's general election, and according to the Minister of Tourism, no one would have come if they thought that Zimbabwe was a conflict area. In the same year, the National Gallery of Zimbabwe successfully exhibited its Visions of Corridor Construction, that is a quote, in Rome and Venice, Italy. This was in collaboration with the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage and Enhancement. The one-month-long exhibition included Zimbabwean contemporary art and Shona stone sculpture, and it provided a platform for the sharing of insights into the current creative practice in Zimbabwe. Just to note that the Kariba Dam construction in the 1950s was a result of the joint efforts between Zimbabwe and Italy. The exhibition provided an opportunity to showcase the work of two Italian artists who had documented the project from its early construction. It also was an opportunity to portray contemporary Zimbabwean art and contemporary Shona stone sculpture, like I have said. 2014 witnessed Zimbabwe employing its religious heritage in its practice of cultural diplomacy. The United Methodist Church held what it dubbed its Ebenezer Convention, marking 117 years of its journey in Zimbabwe since 1897. The convention attracted 15,000 United Methodist guests from all over the world, with one of the biggest foreign delegations coming from the USA. A few weeks later, the International Jehovah's Witness Convention was held in Harare. This attracted a record 82,409 delegates from all over the world. 3,600 of these were from the USA, Germany, and Brazil. There are several cultural diplomacy projects which the country organizes on an annual basis to provide a forum for the exchange of ideas and views between artists and other cultural practitioners within the sub-region, the African continent, and the wider world. These aim to bring about national, regional, and international social integration and understanding. The first one is the National Arts Council Cultural Week, and the first of these was held in May of 2002 as a commemorative event for the UNESCO-established World Day of Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. 2015 marked the 14th anniversary of the Cultural Week, bringing artists from all over the world. The week is intended to highlight and represent the diversity of Zimbabwean society, celebrating the country's cultural heritage in the past and present. It also aims at bringing about national, regional, and international social integration and understanding through arts and culture. This is a fine example of cultural diplomacy as it celebrates cultural diversity, understanding, and tolerance through the medium of traditional cultural elements such as dance, music, religious activities, crafts, and food. Culture thus becomes the vehicle for achieving societal goals such as peaceful coexistence. The Harare Festival of the Arts is another platform for creating understanding. This is a week-long annual event featuring musical performances, literature, food, and poetry, and fashion. Last year, the festival featured 130 local and 70 international performances, the latter being drawn from 30 countries. Another tool that we use is the Zimbabwe International Festival, which is built on a philosophy of developing trust, teamwork, relationships, and creative collaboration for the benefit of film and cultural identity in Zimbabwe and our region. It aims to offer Zimbabweans a platform to tell their own stories, to explore and promote their culture through the medium of film, and to provide a venue to dissect and discuss international cinema and cultures. Through the exchange of information and skills, interaction and creation of synergies with other art forms, it is clear that the Zimbabwe International Film Festival represents cultural diplomacy in its true forms. Another tool we use is the Chikwira Dance Festival, which showcases a variety of traditional dances by primary school children from around the country. The festival is intended to disseminate knowledge to Zimbabwe's primary school children of their country's varied cultural heritage. The festival is therefore a conscious step of using culture towards peaceful relations, creating peaceful relations among a new generation of Zimbabweans. It uses dance as a way to foster cultural exchange and understanding among Zimbabwean youth. Dance is thus used as a vehicle towards social integration among youths from various ethnic groups. The National Gallery of Zimbabwe is another tool which we use, and this has been in existence for more than 50 years. And in its lifetime, it has witnessed the dramatic shift in the country from colonialism to independence. In addition, it has been central to the meteoric rise of Zimbabwean artists in the world art market. The gallery's vision is to explore and express the essence of Zimbabwean identity through the visual arts. Its mission is to promote talent, creativity, and visual heritage through local and international platforms. In the past, exhibitions have been shown of the Kariba Dam construction, which I already mentioned, the Cuban photo exhibition, and the Toyota Dream Car exhibition, among others. The gallery has also carried out exhibitions in other countries, leading to the popularization of Shona stone sculpture. These Shona artifacts now grace many art galleries in the world, and they decorate the homes of kings and queens, politicians, and art lovers. The last tool I will talk about is sports diplomacy, namely cricket diplomacy, which is a heritage and legacy from our past history. The first cricket match was staged in the country in 1890, and Zimbabwe's ever first World Cup match was in 1983. The country has continued to play cricket to date, though it also at one point became victim of the country's isolation. I mention this just as at this point Zimbabwe's national cricket team is playing cricket in Pakistan. This is after the isolation of Pakistan for 6 years following a terrorist attack on the team. It was Bangladesh and the Pakistan national team. Or putting in practice initiatives to peace at a time when new forms of violence are currently on the rise. We should all strive to play our part in safeguarding and promoting peace in the face of new forms of violence. I thank you for listening to me.